Alright folks, today we're going to be tying up an olive woolly bugger. Now I'm going to make a part 2 to this video where I'm going to go much more in depth with regard to the different materials, how I like to tie different variations of this woolly bugger. But in order to keep this a quick instructional video for those of you out there who are just looking for something that's really concise and to the point, I'm just really going to keep this a pure tying video. Narrating what I'm doing, but not really going into too much depth on exactly what I'm doing. So we'll keep this nice and short for those of you out there who just want something quick and concise. I'm going to be tying up a number 8 olive woolly bugger. The very first thing we're going to do is start our thread. Trim the extra. We're going to finish wrapping thread down our hook shank. You don't have to get too meticulous with these wraps. You don't want them to be too far apart, but they don't have to be perfect. And we're going to go just about to the point here where we're starting to get to the bend of the hook. Now, I've already selected my piece of marabou here. This is what we're going to be using to tie the tail. Now generally you're going to want your tail to be about the same length as the shank of your hook. So you're going to kind of hold it up, get an idea of where you're tying. Don't obsess over this too much. It's not going to make or break the fly if you're a couple millimeters off. I would say if you're going to err in any direction, probably err longer. And 3 or 4 loops and your tail is secure. Looking good. Now we're going to cut off the excess. And put on a couple wraps. And I just broke my thread. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave this in because you may break your thread every once in a while. Not a big deal, not the end of the world. You don't even necessarily have to restart the fly. I'm going to show you how quick you can actually take care of a situation like this, just so you know that you don't have to fret. So I'm just getting the thread set back up on my bobbin here, because it did come off of the bobbin holder. And I'm going to show you exactly what to do to salvage a fly like this if you end up having a thread break. Okay. So I'm back here with my thread. Now look, very simple. If your thread does break on you like this, as long as your fly doesn't start unraveling on you, which this hasn't, just restart your thread somewhere. Cut off the excess. Now come in tying fairly hard, because you want to make sure that everything you were tying with before doesn't lose tension. Alright, so we're looking good. We've salvaged this fly. Again, if this happens to you, don't freak out. As long as you move fairly quickly, and as long as there's not a lot of materials in your fly that have just unraveled on you, there's no reason that you can't salvage a tie like that. Now this fly is going to work just fine. It's going to perform just fine. Now, next step, we're going to add our wire. I'm going to be using copper wire in a small size here. You can use slightly thicker wire, you can use it in size gold, you could use silver wire if you wanted to. Not super important exactly which wire you're using here. Again, don't obsess over it. Use what you've got, or use whatever you think you'd like to use. Don't obsess over it. I'm tying that in. And now we're just going to kind of let that be. Now we're going to tie in our chenille. I've got this card here with my chenille that I'm going to be using. You can see the material here. It's got some shiny flecks in it. which I tend to like. Now what we're going to do before we tie this in is just strip a little bit of the olive chenille fibers off to expose the underthread here, which is going to allow us to tie it in without adding too much more bulk to the back of the fly here. And remember, all this is going to be covered up, so don't go too crazy trying to make it look perfect at every step. Now, once you've got your chenille and your wire tied in, we're going to bring our thread back up to the head of the fly here. And we're going to start wrapping our chenille. 1, 2, 3. We're just making touching wraps, and on roughly every third or fourth wrap, just give it a tug to make sure it's seated well. Now, this is not going to be a very bulky body on this woolly bugger. Sometimes that's advantageous, sometimes it isn't. It's up to you entirely. Certainly you could get bulkier chenille than what I'm using here, and oftentimes I do. Use whatever either you have or whatever suits your purposes. We cut that material off. Now, this is where we get our hackle. Got a piece of olive hackle feather here. Now you see there's two different types of fibers on this feather. We have these webby fibers here, sort of fluffy webby fibers, and we have the finer fibers up here. We do not want these fluffy fibers, so what we're actually going to do is peel them back. You're going to grip just about where those fluffy fibers start and just peel back. Peel them right off. Do the same thing on the other side. Going to grab where those fluffy fibers begin, peel back. You see what I've done? I've now gotten those fluffy fibers stripped off. Okay? Now I'm just going to actually cut this portion off, throw away whatever was left from the part of the feather that had the fluff, and here we go. That's what we're left with. Now we're going to tie this in. So we have the stem of the feather here. We're going to sort of put it right here in front of the chenille and capture it with your thread. 1 or 2 wraps in position, maybe 1 or 2 tighter wraps just to keep it in place. Then we're going to cut off the excess portion of the feather stem there. Now, you can wrap this hackle with your hand. I like to use hackle pliers just because when you're tying these flies, your fingers can tend to get in the way sometimes when you've got these hackle wraps really close together. It just ends up being easier if you use this. I used to do this with my hands. When I started using the hackle pliers, I never went back. So we're just going to hook the hackle pliers right on, like so. And now we're just going to start making our wraps. Couple wraps kind of close together towards the head of the bugger, and then a little further away as we get further down the shank of the hook. Now that we're towards the end of the hook shank, this is where our wire comes in. You remember I had the wire here. Now this is actually what's going to secure our hackle. It's going to secure our hackle right here at the back of the woolly bugger, and it's also going to be wrapped back up the entire hook shank in order to have multiple points at which this hackle is being secured to the hook shank, which is going to help to make your woolly bugger much more durable. So we're going to start wrapping this. First we capture our hackle. We can just pull that right off, the excess I mean. And now we're just going to start turning our wire back up the fly. Now you don't want to capture the hackle fibers here. So what you're doing is as you wrap your wire up the hook shank, you're wiggling it. And just this little wiggle motion that you see me performing here is going to help ensure that it captures little or none of those hackle fibers, which is ideal. Then once we get to the head of the fly here, you can just give it a couple wraps and then capture it with our thread. Add a couple more wraps at the head here to make sure the wire is really secure. Now we're going to helicopter off the wire here. Just spinning it, it'll pop right off. Add a couple more wraps on our head. Excellent. Now we're going to whip finish the fly. Got a whip finish tool here. Alright, now the whip finish pretty much holds this fly together. You could probably fish it like this without a single issue. Me personally, I like to add a little bit of head cement to everything I tie just because I feel like it adds a little bit of durability. So what I'm going to use to apply that, since my head cement comes with this large brush, which is unsuitable for a small woolly bugger head, I'm instead going to put a little bit of the head cement on this toothpick and apply it that way. Don't want to get it inside the hook eye, you want to just keep this right in the head. Now there's going to look like there's sort of a glob of head cement when you're doing this. Don't worry about that, it's going to soak right into the thread. It's going to harden up and prevent that thread from ever unraveling. And that's it, folks. Here we have a number 8 olive woolly bugger. And I can guarantee you that this is going to catch you some trout. So have fun.